Good dad versus bigoted mother-in-law. Hi, 42-year-old male. I am considering cutting my mother-in-law out of my life after she expressed some concerns about the way I'm raising my son. 17-year-old male. I'm a single dad. My wife died when our son was 3 years old, and it's just been the two of us. My late wife's family has been a part of our lives ever since, pretty much, and my mother-in-law and I have had a relatively good relationship until now. She did make some occasional comments about some things I did with my son, but it was nothing too serious, all things I was able to ignore or take lightly. My son came out as gay about a year ago. I am totally fine with this. He's allowed to love whomever he chooses. Although it was a little surprising at first, he's a smart kid and I trust him to make the right choices. He and his boyfriend seem very happy together, so of course his happiness is all I can ask for as a parent. We kept his coming out between us for some time. My side of the family knew, but he was a little bit weary about telling his mom's side of the family. They're a very conservative Christian family, and their views don't exactly align with ours. Nonetheless, he chose to offhandedly mention his boyfriend to them, and oh, the lashing I got from my mother-in-law. I won't repeat everything she said for the sake of my own anger. She just said a lot of nasty stuff about the way he's being raised. She even went as far as suggesting some sort of conversion therapy for him, and that was the last straw for me. Long story short, I don't want him to be subjected to the things she says or have her do something without me knowing, as he is still young and pretty impressionable. He's just starting to figure out who he is, and I don't want his grandmother to ruin this for him. This is the happiest I've seen him in a while, so I've been considering cutting her out of our lives. Some of my family members think this a bit extreme over one thing, but I don't believe so. My son and I are very close, and I don't want him to think that I'm okay with this kind of behavior, especially from his grandmother. So, I'm a little bit torn on the matter. I don't want to act impulsively, but I also don't want my son to think that he isn't important to me. So long story short, my mother-in-law suggested conversion therapy for my son after he came out as gay, on top of saying some icky homophobic things. So I'm considering going no contact with her. Some of my family members think it's too extreme, but I'm not sure of this. Update. First off, I'd like to thank everyone for their advice. I didn't get the chance to respond to any of them before the post was removed, but know that I read them all and appreciate it. So, I took the advice of some users to talk to my son about his grandmother. I wasn't exactly sure how to go about it because, naturally, I didn't necessarily want to bring up anything too hurtful that she'd said, but he is old enough to know what's going on and be part of the decision. I started off by mentioning some of the concerns my mother-in-law had about him coming out to her and him having a boyfriend, and I made it perfectly clear that whatever we chose to do next was going to be as a team. He seemed disappointed, but not surprised at his grandmother's reaction. He admitted that she'd already tried to coerce him into therapy behind my back, although there is no reason for him to have to change to suit her needs. I tried to keep calm throughout the conversation to make sure he knew that I was listening and that I was hearing everything he was saying. Thankfully, she didn't use colorful language with him, but he did express how he'd be uncomfortable being around his mom's side of the family without myself or someone from my side of the family with him, out of the fear of what they might do or say. We ended up deciding to go no contact temporarily for some time. We haven't completely shot down the idea of going no contact entirely, but he wanted to give her a chance to adjust to the new change, and I was on board with this. Obviously, I set some ground rules with mother-in-law, and we had an extensive conversation about her doing things behind my back. I mentioned to her that he will be telling me everything that she says, but her excuse was just that she was doing the right thing by getting him to do this. She's been given the chance to preserve a relationship with her late daughter's son, and it's her choice if she's going to let his sexuality get in the way of that. Because at the end of the day, it's not a phase, and he's finally truly embracing himself. It's been some time since then, but my mother-in-law hasn't shown much sign of change. Her stance on the matter is still the same. She's a pretty tough one to crack. She still tries to call from time to time, and the texting has gotten frequent. She's been sending my son loads of info about some of the programs he should look into. He's been deleting them almost immediately, and I think he's starting to feel like he can finally breathe again. After the initial post, I could feel that something was weighing down on him, and it was most likely the fact that mother-in-law tried to coerce him into therapy. I've been checking in with him from time to time, but we've mostly been preoccupied with preparing for university. For now, I'd like to say things are well without my mother-in-law, but it'd be even better if she'd stop trying to push her own agenda onto him. I hope she learns that if she wants to preserve a relationship with him, she needs to accept him for who he is. With that being said, it'd still be unfortunate for my son to not have any sort of relationship with his mom's side of the family, since they're the last connection he has to her. So any advice on how to get her to understand that this is not something that she can pray away? Or should we even bother and just go full no contact instead? Final post. TLDR, my son and I have decided to block mother-in-law and go full no contact for the time being. Mother-in-law doesn't seem like she's going to change her views on the matter, and my son doesn't need to be subjected to even more stress. My Sil, along with some other family members, reached out recently just to say that he has their support. Some things first. 1. Again, thank you for all the responses on the previous post. Firstly, I'd like to apologize for how I addressed the conversion therapy on it. It is most definitely not therapy. No one should be subjected to something like that. Unfortunately, we do live in a conservative state where there are no laws against minors going through this. 2. I also wanted to address some people's suggestions of using this as a learning experience for him. He's in high school right now. He's been out to some people there longer than he has to me, and has dealt with this lack of stuff alone and is fully capable of doing so. Personally, I believe it'd hit a lot harder coming from someone who is supposed to love him unconditionally and his close family, rather than teenage boys who casually throw around slurs. 3. Some users suggested therapy for my son, and with the surge in Asian hate lately and everything going on with our family, he has been talking to a therapist. He's pretty open about his feelings with me, so everything seems okay right now. His boyfriend is also a sweet guy and has been there for him. They grew up together, so they're pretty comfortable talking to one another. So, the last couple of days have been pretty packed. For now, my son and I have decided to go full no contact with mother-in-law for the sake of his mental health, especially before going off to a university like MIT. I don't want him to have to feel preoccupied with his grandmother's homophobia. He's fully aware that it's a decision we made together and no one is blaming him for anything. The last thing mother-in-law said to us was about his mother and how she wouldn't have allowed this. 100% not true. My amazing wife would have never allowed this. Our son was our mini miracle, as she used to say, and she wouldn't allow anyone to hurt him in any way. After that, some of my other in-laws decided to reach out now. Word travels pretty fast apparently. My sister-in-law reached out to tell us that we have her support, and mother-in-law was definitely wrong for what she suggested. Some of his older cousins also reached out for the same reason, which made him feel a lot better about coming out. My brother-in-law and some others were on mother-in-law's side in the situation, so I didn't bother hearing what they had to say. We really don't need any toxicity in our lives right now, especially from people who aren't willing to change. We sent mother-in-law some things she could read up on about what goes on in those therapy camps and about acceptance before blocking her. There's probably a 1% chance she'll actually look at the resources, but it's up to her now whether or not she wants to accept him for the amazing man he's growing up to be. Overall, I'm still navigating this whole single dad thing and trying my best to keep my son happy and healthy before he leaves for university. It'll definitely be a change I'll have to adjust to having him gone. But he's worked hard for this. Now let's see what the community has to say. Opinion number 1 says, "What an awesome read. My 2 kids are grown. We've had times of no contact when I felt it was best for my kids. And I was always open with why, in an age-appropriate way. Now, it's up to them to deal with her in whatever way they choose, and they know that their dad and I fully, without reservation, respect and support their own choices. My son has found a good-natured middle ground where he maintains some contact, and has the emotional resources to not take her seriously. He can laugh at her like I try to do. My daughter is a little more hurt, has a long memory, and only touches base with her grandmother occasionally. We fully support her. How each child chooses to deal as they hit adulthood is always a tricky thing to navigate as a parent. They change, and it is up to us to affirm and support their choices, and give hugs when those choices don't work out well. I think OP is doing great." Opinion number 2 says, "My son came out to me not too long ago. This is my biggest fear when he eventually tells his dad's side of the family. My in-laws are members of an evangelist church, and I genuinely have no idea how they will react long term. I have no issues with cutting them off if necessary, but I really don't think it will go that far. Christ, parenting is hard." Opinion number 3 says, "I've had folks be truly disbelieving that it's that bad when I tell them. They simply refuse to accept that it could be abusive. Bear in mind, these are the people who think that being gay is a choice that people make. So to them, a conversion therapy should simply comprise something akin to talk therapy, where you try to basically logic someone into understanding that it's better to not be gay. Like, if homosexuality is a choice people make, then the therapy should simply be a reasoned, rational argument about their relationship with God and family to get them to choose differently. If you tell those people no, conversion therapy is essentially a form of institutionalized abuse, they will not believe you. They will tell you you're mistaken, it's not that bad, those are lies. Because being gay is a choice, and teenagers are extremely rational and never make choices based on spite or emotion. So you can just talk to the kid and send them to church so they understand that God will not accept this choice and neither will their family, so they need to choose to stop being so silly and recalcitrant and just choose better. Anyone who says they beat boys for looking at any part of a woman other than her ass or tits, and beat girls who don't look sufficiently submissive wife material just because it's a sunny day and good for beating, well, they're just spreading propaganda. They're just trying to dissuade you, an honest Christian boy, from doing what you know in your heart is not suitable for such a good upstanding young man. They don't need to abuse you into that. You're lying. How dare you lie? You see the insidious shit we're up against here. If you tell them it's abusive, they'll say you're making up stories. If you show them the abuse, they'll claim it's Photoshop or staged pictures. If you show them news stories of children given over by their parents who were rescued from them, they'll cite crisis actors and say that Alex Jones told them all about this and how we can't believe those lying little sluts who are probably just doing it for attention, etc., shit that no child should ever hear. How about you guys? What do you guys think about this whole situation, and what would your advice be for OP? Let's all discuss in the comments section below.